Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. And today we're joined again by a man who's lived a life as complex as the headlines he's part of. Errol Musk, father of tech titan Elon Musk, and now a very good chum of the Andrew Eborn Show. From Elon's role in Donald Trump's administration to the seismic shifts of Trump's first 100 days, we're going to unpack it all. Errol, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you've been traveling all over the place at the moment, haven't you?
Yes, I've been in the United States for 3 weeks. Before that, a week in Dubai. And I was due to go to India on Sunday, but that's been cancelled because of portending war between dysfunctional Pakistan and complicated India. You know?
Well, you could go and sort it out, couldn't you, Errol?
Well, it's an atomic war, apparently. They're going to nuke each other, bring down the population by about 0.00001%,
Right.
you know?
A bit of a nightmare. I want to look. It's 100 days of Donald Trump being president for the second time around. You've previously said that Elon is politically dead center, but he's obviously been deeply involved with Donald Trump, even attending his first cabinet meeting as a special advisor. How do you view Elon's political evolution, especially in light of Trump's first 100 days?
Well, it's been excellent. It can't be better. It's been absolutely excellent within the bounds of human endeavor. Really terrific. Something we couldn't even have imagined, happening, and finally happening. And they've set the tone now, and they haven't even got into the big ones, like Department of Defense and so on. And we have a situation there where, for example, the Department of Defense hasn't been able to produce a balanced budget or even know where the money is gone for 12 years. And we're not talking about peanuts, we're talking about billions of dollars, So it's really creepy, in a way. And, so he's done his thing. And as I said before, Elon is not somebody who'll go into this and say, oh, well, now I'm set. I've got my desk, my briefcase, my sandwiches, and so on. I'm going to go. And my big aim is 10 o'clock tea and 3 o'clock tea. That's the life of the average, bureaucrat. And leaving, at 5 to 4, saying, I'm just going to pop into the men's room before I go home, and then quickly nipping out the back door, and, the standard life. And of course, Fridays is another day with them, So, what a waste of human endeavor. Anyway.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely right. Well, one of the things that they have been looking at, obviously, is the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, during the first 100 days. They aim to slash federal spending and all this waste that you spoke about. The Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll from April 28th, yesterday, shows 35% of Americans approve of Elon's role, but 57% disapproving, reflecting opposition to Trump's cuts. What do you make of this public sentiment, and how do you think Elon's involvement has shaped Trump's early policies?
Well, the poll that was taken at Washington Post was taken in their mailroom, while the bosses were watching, you see. And so they said to some of them, don't be afraid to approve DOGE. And unfortunately, those 35% took a chance and approved DOGE. And now they're looking for a job somewhere, you see. So that's a Washington Post form of taking a poll. No, it's not like that.
So you disagree with the poll's
in
findings?
the United States for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
across the United States. Of course, I mean, it's nonsense, you know. It's like asking my mother and my grandmother whether I'm smart, you know, and hearing from my mother and my grandmother, oh, you're the smartest boy we've ever known. I mean, you know, that's a Washington Post poll. And, you know, but I've just been across the United States, and everyone is absolutely thrilled with DOGE. And no one, in fact, I was the only one. And I spoke to Stanford, you know, I spoke to 500-600 people at Stanford one evening for 2 hours. And I actually gave them an anti-DOGE speech.
Right.
My speech, I think I sent it to you.
Yes, you did. That was fantastic.
In which I pointed out, you know, that you know, you should actually occasionally help people who need help, you know, without expecting a lot in return. But no, the general feeling in the US is high time. You know, I mean, people. That's a country in which people look for value in everything around them. You know, very critical, and will quite happily do what I probably never do, and that is send a meal back, you know, if they're in a restaurant or something like that, or even say, this wine isn't quite right, I'm sure, you know. And the American way is, oh, no, don't worry, you know, oh, God, you know, Monty Python style, slash themselves across the back with with something, and then take the wine and throw it in the bin, you naughty wine, and then bring them in a fresh bottle, you know, after they've consumed most of it, of course. That is the American way, you know. They want everything like so perfect. It's actually quite annoying, you know. You occasionally wish something would be, you know, the occasional light wouldn't work or something, you know. But no. In America, everything has to work, and so no, they're very happy with DOGE, and they all know about what the government's been doing,
Right.
you know.
Well, another report. What
No
I love
problem
about
there.
having, yeah, what I love about having you on the show, Errol, is we always unpack what's reported in the press and get the real take. Another thing that's been reported is that Elon's lost 113 billion net worth, largely due to Tesla's plunging profits and Trump's tariffs. How do you think, firstly, do you think that's an accurate figure? And secondly, how do you think this financial hit has affected Elon's focus? And do you believe his time in government was worth the cost to his business empire?
Well, you know, that's not really right what you just said. First of all, Tesla's price of share a year ago was about 40% lower than what it is now. So over the past year, the share price has grown by 40%. This in itself is actually something to be alarmed about if you're in a normal country and you see shares growing at that rate. It's too high. You know, the normal rate for a share to grow would be, say, 15 would be wonderful percent. I mean, you know, 18% would be incredible and acceptable. But when you see things growing at 40, 50%, that's very high. And when you see things growing at 250%, well, then, you know, what was going on? Something's been going on here. You know, it sounds like tampering. So, you know, in reality, the share can't do that. I mean, there's a value to things, and it can't jump like that. Now, it did do that, and it had to do with largely people playing the market and Trump coming in and all that sort of thing. No, Tesla is very, very fine, very healthy, and you know, I can tell you that every third car from San Francisco to Texas is a Tesla. Right. That in itself is frightening, you know. And I hear people saying, yes, but, you know, and from our point of view, if every second car was a Tesla, or we found that every 10th car wasn't a Tesla, we'd sort of go into a room and wonder, what have we done here? We've sort of upset the apple cart terribly. You understand?
Right.
What about these poor people? What have we done? And yeah, I know. So the thing at the moment, the big thing at the moment is everybody wants the new Model Y. It's such a huge improvement on what was already quite a good car, the new Model Y.
Right.
I've been doing full self-driving for 3 weeks, where I don't touch the steering wheel. I mean, it's kind of weird. You get so used to it. And
it's totally weird. I've done it. And you panic a little bit, don't you? Because you feel as though you're no longer in control.
Well, initially you see what you're doing, and then you kind of drift off, if you know what I mean, and start thinking about something you were supposed to do or plan to do, or some phone call you didn't make, and you realize, oh my God, I'm drifting off here, and I'm not watching the road. Now, fortunately, or you do watch the road, but you're drifting off. You're not looking. You're not actually focusing, and that's a bit of a problem. And there's a thing on the new Model Y that actually watches you. So there are these eyes on you. Right. And if you take your eyes off the road, then a big red alarm comes up saying your eyes are off the road, which is, oh okay, sorry, okay. And you get back to it, But yeah, no, the full self-driving is absolutely really something to experience. The visuals on the screen showing you exactly what's in front of you, what the road looks like in front of you, from what the vehicles are in front of you for some distance, is quite extraordinary. Right. And my first full self-driving experience, full self-driving, was in 2015, where Kimball, my son, actually did say, Dad, we're testing this. And he had his hands, cupped under the steering wheel, not touching the steering wheel. And we drove 45 miles across from Denver Airport to Boulder, and quite successfully. But now it's a little bit, you need to sort of put in pin mode, where there's a pin that sticks you in the backside every 5 minutes, bring you back to life, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And the worst is if you're on your own, full self-driving. When you full self-driving and you've got passengers, they're all like watching you, and sort of like you can feel their apprehension as you drive. Right. And so you tend to show you're really on the ball here. You're not making any mistakes. But when you go by yourself, it's almost, it borders on, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this, because it's amazing how quickly your mind drifts. Right. To, oh my God, I didn't call Andrew. You know what I mean? Yes. And you're not looking at the road. You are looking, but you're not focusing. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's amazing how quickly that happens. Yeah. But otherwise, no, there's no problem with Tesla.
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because people like to report bad news and everything else, but they on the ground, you're saying it's just getting better and better, and as you say, a significant part of the market. The other thing which is happening is in the media is they're talking about Amazon recently launched its own satellites to compete with Elon's Starlink, which dominates the satellite internet market. At the same time, obviously, you've got Trump's administration have proposed cuts to NASA funding, which Elon called troubling, giving SpaceX his role as a major NASA contractor. How do you see Trump's policies affecting the space industry, and what does that mean for Elon's ventures?
I don't know. So, everything has changed with Trump. Under Biden, the Environmental Protection Agency was given carte blanche instructions, make it as difficult as possible for Elon at Boca Chica, In other words, if there's potentially a flock of ducks, is it a flock of ducks or a gaggle of geese or something?
Certainly a gaggle of geese. Yes.
Yes. Then cancel the launch, and make them set everything up again at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2 days' time. So, no, things have improved dramatically. They don't do that anymore. So they've been given orders, or they've been removed from their positions. And Elon has given a much more sensible set of rules to comply by, which they do. They definitely want to comply by the rules. But recently, last year, they were fined $150,000 because when you do a launch, you actually open the floodgates of several reservoirs which contain, quite a few 100,000 cubic yards or meters of water, and you actually douse the spot that the exhaust focuses on until the launch vehicle gets a bit off the ground. And to do that's to stop the rock under the concrete and rock underneath from melting, And they were fined $150,000 because they said this deluge of water had caused soil runoff, unusually, difficult soil runoff, which didn't, of course.
Right.
And because they replaced the soil with bulldozers. But that's the kind of thing that they've been dealing with. And anything that as petty as possible to prevent them from making progress. But that's over. That's totally over.
Yeah, it's interesting. When
there's no problem now.
You talk about those sort of 150,000. I mean, a congressional report has revealed that Elon and his companies face $2.37 billion in potential federal penalties on the day Trump took office. And people have talked about conflicts of interest in the DOGE role. Critics have also argued about the influence has led to ousting of officials investigating his businesses. As his father, how do you view these allegations? And do you think Elon's dual role as a government advisor and business mogul is sustainable?
Well, the US is that's how they operate. Every time you think you can, sort of stymie someone, you move that way. It's like a ping pong game. I mean, they just you bet, he bets, he bets, you bet, he bets. And they just keep on trying to do it, and it's just par for the course. The lawyers, of course, laughing all the way to the bank. And, but it's also good because it's a kind of control that exists that you should have somewhere and should possibly, I wouldn't imagine it's a good idea, but you should have it purely from, say, a government agency. But the government agencies are lazy. So in many ways, these checks and balances of, people saying, oh, you shouldn't have that, and yeah, it's all right, you can, and it is. It's a bit of a game that they play, and tie each other up, in legal arguments and get on with the thing. It's what they're doing. It's the American scene. It's the American way. It's not. There's nothing to be worried about. Not at all. But we do what is important is we now have a situation in which the general feeling towards what the cutting edge people are doing is, give them a chance, give them a break. Don't do what you can to put a stop to it. It's like, I try to use examples. Your 16-year-old daughter wants to start going out with boys, and then there's the attitude, oh, she can go out with nobody, and then there's the other one, oh, she can go out with anybody, and so we sort of trying to find a middle point, So it's along those lines, and no, at the moment things are in fact, it's put more load on SpaceX to produce more. Having had these silly things that have given people a chance to say, oh, well, this week we don't have to do anything. They don't have that anymore. Now they've got every week in which they have to do something. So in that sense, it's much better,
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's obviously
Yeah.
happened are these tariffs, and we've spoken about tariffs beforehand, like the 125% on Chinese imports, and there have been controversial cuts, such as terminating food and medical aid programs in Africa and the Middle East, with 77% of Americans opposing cuts to medical research, and obviously question those stats, as you always say, according to the same Washington Post poll. Do you think Trump's approach aligns with what the public expected, and how has Elon's involvement influenced those decisions?
Well, Elon is someone, I can tell you, he doesn't believe in tariffs. He feels there should be free trade. It's like that with anybody who's in the private industry. I mean, when I was working as a consulting engineer, we used to import a lot of stuff to South Africa for factories that we were doing mass construction of factories in what we call the homelands. And we needed, we were buying things at 25,000 at a time, type of thing. And I was involved in that. And it was terrible. It was so easy, for example, working with the DDR in those days, the old German Democratic Republic. They were so happy. Of course, they had Varta, which is one of the best, one of the most superlative electric manufacturing companies in the world, which is now back on its feet and today producing the world's finest lead acid batteries and lead acid and acid gel and so forth, and various other things as well, many other things. But it was wonderful with the DDR in those days when we were buying from them. There was no import or export or anything. It was just pay us and here are the goods. You know what I mean? Right. And but so whereas working with all other countries, there was always, you never knew what the end price was. You never could quite work out what you were going to be paying because you didn't know if it was going to be a 15% excise or whatever it is, or it was going to be 35% and all this kind of thing, So, no, it's wonderful to have no tariffs. But again, if you have countries that are imposing tariffs on you, then you have to do something about it. The classic thing is when I was when I had my children at university in Canada, and we would go there. The big thing in Canada, in Toronto and surrounds, was to get to Buffalo as early as possible on a Saturday morning. Buffalo's in the United States, across the border, and then do all your purchases, from toasters to kettles to butter to margarine to cheese to gherkins to every single thing that you needed, and then load your vehicle to the point that it's actually the goods transport vehicle, and then get back across the border. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I would see this happening all the time because it was so much cheaper to buy in Buffalo than to buy the same thing in Toronto, because the tariffs that the Canadians imposed in those days on American goods was like 250%.
Right.
Or some huge tariff. I know on the dairy stuff, it was all anything to do with dairy produce was heavily surcharged of tariffed, and so you could buy your let's say piece of cheese or something on the Toronto side, and it would cost you $30. You could go across and buy it for $5. So you were kind of like, why are we not buying it? So you buy everything in Buffalo. This was a standard procedure, and then you would head back across the border, and of course the American customs people, they had nothing to, they didn't care, and they were quite happy, and with it, they each had 6-shooters and big hats, and looked like they were ready for the movies. And then you'd get to the Canadian guys who would have all their buttons the wrong way, in their jackets, and their hair would stick out from these little cloth caps that they wore with a sort of, is that a peak or isn't it on the cap? And, the hair all sticking out and they're unshaven. And that was the Canadian border guards, whose job it was to say to the people, where did you get these things, And then, oh no, I came across with them. I came across from Canada in the car with them to visit my relatives, and now I'm going back again with them, you know.
Right.
And the Canadian, you didn't buy it in Buffalo. And no. We just came across the border with them, and now we're heading back. You know, we didn't have a chance to offload on the Canadian side. I mean, really, you know. And the Canadian guy's going, oh, all right, then. And then off you go. I mean, that was everybody did that.
Yeah.
You know, you just didn't buy anything on the Toronto side.
Yeah.
You were stupid to buy anything on the Toronto side.
Yeah.
And so the Canadians have been charging tariffs on American goods that are absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah.
And now Trump has said, look, you know, you can't do this anymore, you know. And this also happened because the Americans kind of considered the Canadians as sort of like poor, silly people, you know. They kind of felt sorry for them, you know, shame, you know. And you'd come down to Buffalo, and people would say to you, I did this many times. They'd say, "Oh, you'd meet somebody and start talking, and then you'd say, oh, I'm actually staying in Kingston or something where we were, which is on the Canadian side." And then they'd say, the Americans would say, "Oh, why did you go up there? What are you going up there for?" You know. So you know, it's like what I went shopping in Brixton or something, you know, this morning. You know, what'd you do that for? You know, I mean, talk about London. You know, I went to do my early morning shopping down at Clapham Junction, you know, or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, funny.
Interesting. I mean, and the point
be...
you make about tariffs. I mean, Elon very publicly has said he's against tariffs. Obviously, he assembles parts, so rather than manufacturing cars, he assembles parts from all over the world, doesn't he, with Teslas? So the tariffs hit him particularly hard.
Well, yes, no, but with all those kind of things where you have multinational, as you probably know, with multinational companies making parts for products which are then shipped worldwide and everything, there are these various conditions that the parts are moved about, you know, not like simply, you know, move tax. They enter into a sort of these parts enter into a final, you know, sort of like VAT works, you know, sort of thing. You know, that's only at the end that because of all the movement would be silly, you know, if you were, you know, if some part came from this country and moved to that country and it's tariffed, and then it's tariffed from another country, and you know, it doesn't work like that with the international companies. They have you know, rules, sensible rules that enable that to happen without, you know, accumulating masses of cross-border tariffs, you know.
Yeah.
It has to be like that.
And obviously, I mean, these things is very much a negotiating tool anyway, and lots of trade deals seem to be being done as a result of it. I want to go back to Elon and his time in the sort of Trump presidency, the first 100 days. Obviously, he's accompanied, it's wonderful to see actually, by his son to lots of political events. And I know you took Elon when he was a young boy to the event. Grimes, the mother, obviously she's been pleading to keep him out of the spotlight. As the grandfather, Errol, how do you feel about Elon's approach to parenting in the public eye, especially during such a tumultuous first 100 days for Trump?
Well, you know, I mean, Elon has had all these children. The first children he did something we all do, and I'm guilty of it as well. But luckily for me in the past, it wasn't that bad. I was at home nearly every night. I mean, occasionally I would be away for a couple of days. But when Elon's kids were born, it was a case of being away a lot. I mean, people are moving around in the US, and it's a bit better now, but they were moving around in the US at a tremendous rate. I was experiencing that myself when we moved to the United States. So, for example, I might go for a week to Texas, to the rocket range. When I first started, when I was one of the first 9 or so with SpaceX, and I wouldn't see the family, and then I'd come back, and then we'd be told we got to, and so forth, you know. So Elon had a lot of that sort of thing, So his children, his first children, as they've complained, that they hardly ever saw him.
Right.
You know, and you actually do need parenting. You do need, you know, the father to come home in the evening and a mother to say, well, I have to tell you what Timmy and whatever the girl's name is did today, and you're going to have to speak to them.
Yes.
And you do need that kind of thing to happen. And that wasn't happening. And so his children have complained, these older children, of never actually having any real contact with him. And now he's changed that with the little one, with X, you know, to try and be more with him, you know.
What's his full name? What do you call him? I mean, it's quite a complicated name.
We just call him X.
X is easy. Okay.
And you know, it's like Rex, X. You know,
yes, X is easy. That's good.
It's neither here nor there. Actually, it's you know, just names are like that. You know, sometimes you know, you might see some real weird name on a woman like Hepzibah or something, and wonder how does anyone could call a child Hepzibah until you meet a beautiful girl called Hepzibah, and then suddenly Hepzibah makes all the sense in the world. so you know, I mean, no, I mean he's overdoing it a bit, but at the same time, I don't know, you know, we learn, you know, as we go along. I mean, you try to reach a balance.
Did you have a chance to see? Did you have a chance to see Elon and X while you were over there?
No. I never had a chance to see anyone at all in the family.
Right.
No one at all.
Right.
And I was busy. I was over with longevity clinics in San Francisco, which is now the in thing. You know, longevity clinics is where you go to have. I heard today it's not that new from other people, but anyway, it seemed new to me when I was over there, where you go to have your genome, you know, sort of.
Oh, right. Yes.
And you, it's now these are actually longevity clinics, and we started one here in Cape Town in January, for which I was asked if I would do an endorsement, and I said, okay, sure, you know, and it was I was told then, you know, how it works a little bit. Now I've learned a lot more, and the idea is that you, from the age of 14, they recommend you go in and you have your sort of annually. And you do this like a 4 or 5 hour checkup, right. And they see what you are predisposed to, you know, health-wise, and they recommend that you should start at the age of 14. And initially, you know, at first I thought, well, this must be very expensive, but they brought it down and down and down, and now it's less than $1,000, which is a lot of money, but. In Cape Town earlier this year, we were talking about $2,000, which is a lot of money. But at any rate, in the US, in California, it's less than 1,000. And then I met one of the Chinese. I met quite a few Chinese doctors who are amazingly impressive guys, and they're like Chinese Americans or American Chinese, or you don't know what they are. They're just like, you know, they're just so Americanized, and but they. For them, Beijing and San Francisco's, both of them are home, you know. And then they say to me, well, you know, if the price worries you, just shoot to Beijing. It's $100 in Beijing,
right,
to have your genome completely mapped. And so I thought I was really wise when I met this one really fancy setup who were very, very good to me. And I said, you know, I read about Dr. Craig Venter, you know, he was the one who mapped the first genome, you know, expecting them to say, gee, we didn't know you knew that, or something like that. And then he said, oh, he's a founder of our company. Here he is now.
Glory. So have you had all your genomes mapped?
No, I haven't. They did, you know, they suggested. But at the moment, I don't need any bad news. You know, I've got enough bad news at the moment.
Oh, is that right? But I think
So,
this
so
is the great
I agree
seismic
with
advances in medicine. I think if you they can now map the whole human genome, can't they? And they can work out cures for diseases, and people could effectively live
yes.
significantly longer. I guess that's the principle.
Well, that's the whole point. That's why it's called longevity
Yeah.
clinics. And
How long
they
do they
figure
reckon
out,
people could live for?
120
120.
to 150.
Right.
So 120
250.
to
Good
150.
heavens.
120 to 150. So it's like
Wow.
you ask them, and they're a bit cagey about it, but they
Yes.
say that 120, if you do all these checks and things, you have a very good chance of having anything that would be a problem for you physically, picked up very, very quickly.
Right.
Of course, we've always had blood tests, So in the last few years, where I've had to, due to, I suppose getting older and everything, I had to have this and that done to me. I even had an open heart operation a while back, a few years back. When I go in for my annual, it's like biannual, but once a year it's like a bigger one. So the February one is big, and and when you go in the February one with me, you have to do like 41 blood tests.
41. Good heavens.
41. No, 41 blood tests. And then that's, in a way, it's a kind of like pre-longevity clinic technique,
Right.
And then they go through
would
all
you
these
like to
blood
live to
tests.
250?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, sometimes I think, if I have another day like I had today, I don't want to.
Yes, I think that's well. No,
And
but
then on the other hand,
it's another thing that Elon's spoken about is obviously the population, the next generation. Where birth rates is at a really worrying level, aren't they?
well, I mean, it is. I mean, in England, I mean, I'm not an expert, but the age in England has grown considerably. So there were a lot more older people than there ever
Right.
were in England,
Yeah.
or in
But
the UK, for that
that's the
matter,
thing.
than
It
there ever
raises
were.
so many questions about financing, economics, looking after the elderly, what they do, having a purpose in life. I mean, all sorts of fascinating conversation. Well, we're going to do a deeper dive into all of that, Errol, next time. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining me.
Okay, okay.